for more insight into China's airline industry. I'm joined by Seth Kaplan. He is the managing partner at Airline Weekly Corp. Seth, good to see you. Thanks for joining us again.
Good to be with you, Michelle.
So, Seth, Hainan Airlines has been previously denied direct flight routes. What is the situation with private airlines and their accessibility to big direct flight routes as opposed to China's state-owned airlines? Now the government has relaxed a lot of the regulations. So where do things stand now?
Absolutely right, Michelle. Things are changing. Not quite an entirely what you might say deregulated environment yet, but absolutely a very noticeable change in tenor there. The government recognizing that, the best thing for a lot of stakeholders might be to allow these private airlines to compete more directly. The big three, as we often call them, Air China, China Eastern, China Southern, is still far larger than any others. But if we look even in the domestic market within China, for example, those three airlines not too many years ago had 85% of the market. Now they're down to 70%. You have competition from, as we heard in Grace's report, Hainan Airlines, also from a couple other very aggressive private airlines. Junyao is one. Spring Airlines, the only sort of large, true, low-cost carrier in China, they're competing domestically. They're competing also to the near abroad, places like Japan. And the market's changing, and Chinese consumers, as well as consumers from abroad headed for China, are benefiting from the new competition.
Well, Seth, let's talk about that, the new competition, the likes of Hainan and budget airline Spring. You mentioned China's big three, Air China, China Eastern Airlines, and China Southern Airlines, the big state ones that have dominated the market. But what do these private airlines need to do to lure customers instead of them? What do they need to do to get an even bigger share of the market?
Yeah, well, Grace talked about the service standards on Hainan. It's becoming regarded really differently from how some of the, frankly, other Chinese airlines have been regarded over time. And this is one of those things, again, that sort of benefits everybody. It's put pressure on the big three, and their service standards, too, are improving. I mean, I can tell you, I was on Air China just several months ago, and it's not the Air China that people picture from, a decade or so ago, where you could notice, quite frankly, a difference, noticeably worse service than some of the other areas in the region. But the private airlines have to take advantage of some of the changes in the marketplace. I mentioned Spring Airlines, for example, a low-cost carrier. It's now permitted to do some of the things in terms of pricing its product, in terms of offering a little bit more of a no-frills product that low-cost carriers in other parts of the world have long been able to do. And so it needs to take advantage of those opportunities. And in the case of Spring Airlines, it's doing that because it's one of the most profitable airlines in the world.
Right. Well, Seth, let's talk about the Chinese airline market as a whole. Air China, which is the biggest international operator among the three state-owned, well, they expect an increase in passengers in 2015 of about 6.6%, so about 88.5 million passengers. Overall, do you see domestic demand in China for international and local flights increasing, even with a slowdown in growth, or is this in line with a shift to a more consumer-driven economy, with airlines being one of the industries that will benefit?
Yeah, I mean, at some point the market will have matured and you won't see quite the same growth rates that you might have seen in the past. But we're still talking about a market that's growing by double digits. Demand is rising very quickly in China. So even when I talk about, for example, a moment ago, the share of the big three dropping, that's not to say they're shrinking. I mean, far from it. These are still rapidly growing airlines. It's just that some of the smaller startups are growing even more rapidly. And these airlines really have to look at changing demand patterns, not just the overall growth in demand, but where people want to go. I mean, if you look within the region, for example, within Northeast Asia, just one thing that's changed in the past couple of years is all of a sudden a lot of new demand to Japan. That driven by, first of all, the better relations between China and Japan in the past year or so. Also, the fact that the yen has weakened against the Chinese yuan. So right. Chinese consumers have more spending power when they go to Japan. Also, the MERS virus in Korea causing some people maybe to think twice about going to Korea. So all of a sudden, Japan is a hot destination. Next year, maybe it'll be something else. And the airlines have to keep an eye on that and really respond to consumer demand.
We're seeing that they are responding to consumer demand, as you say, flights to Japan, kosher food, Western breakfasts, lower budget airlines taking a stronger position. I want to talk about the increase of private capital into the industry. Hainan Airlines is backed by George Soros. Do you see an increasing amount of private capital flowing into the private aviation sector in China?
Absolutely. A lot of investor appetite. Two airlines that I mentioned a moment ago, Junyao Airlines, which is a private sort of a full service airline, although it has a low cost subsidiary, a small one, and then Spring Airlines, which I mentioned as well, very much a low cost carrier. Both of those airlines have done IPOs, initial public offerings this year, and they were wildly successful. In both cases, on their first day of trading, those shares rose as much as they're able to do legally. And the owners of those airlines who took them public became billionaires. So yes, a lot of investor appetite for these airlines, even despite the slower growth of the economy in China. We're talking about a part of the world where yeah, people in the very long term still are very optimistic.
All right. As you said, the airline industry continuing to take off. Thank you so much, Seth Kaplan, Managing Partner at Airline Weekly Corp.